right, we are returning from executive session back into the public session of our North Andover School Committee meeting of January 21st. If you will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you. As we do have the consent agenda. We have an account increase request from the ABECC.
Correct. This is a request to increase the ABECC revolving account fund from 2035, the revolving account fund 2035, from $258,117.18 to $299,000. Their projection to collect with tuition increase is $297,180. This fund also started the year with $10,697.47 in cash. The account we would like to increase is to professional salaries. This is something that you voted on when you voted on the revolving accounts already. We're just asking to move money into the salaries line item.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Chair, do you need a motion to approve that? We need a motion to approve it?
We do.
I'll also move that we approve the account increase request for ABECC.
I'll second.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Moskovich?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, going into continued business, we have our FY 526 high school program of studies that you were to review last week, or last meeting, excuse me, and then email on any questions. Were there any questions submitted on that?
I didn't get any questions.
Nope. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I did find a few typos in there. They're not, they're not super material, but we might as well correct them. So if it pleases the committee, I can just submit those separately.
That's fine, but as a part.
Things like there's stray words like trimesters are still in there, and it should be semesters.
Okay, but it doesn't affect the program of studies.
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the program of studies as laid in the packet for the 25-26 school year at the high school.
Do we have a second?
Sure, second.
Any discussion?
Thank you, Ms. Holman, for getting this to us. There you are. Now, so we can approve it in advance of, before we do the scheduling selection, and good luck to all the students choosing all the new courses for next year.
Thank you. All right, so let's vote. Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Moskovich?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, going into new business, moving right along. We have the FY26 school calendars, and we have been presented with two, one with a pre-Labor Day start and one with a post-Labor Day start. And this is a first read, so this will be for discussion, and then it will not be voted on until our second read.
Just for clarification, the pre-Labor Day start would be in effect for staff on both calendars. It's students who would start after Labor Day on one calendar.
Thank you. All right, so. So the pre-Labor Day is starting August 27th, which is a Wednesday? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, much to the disappointment of my own children, I prefer actually the pre-Labor Day start in that I get worried with the location of Juneteenth and the end of the school year with the post-Labor Day start. If I'm reading it correctly. Yes. I like trying to be done before that.
So we would be absent any snow days.
Right.
Take the gamble. All right.
Yeah. We can
I
have
like the more
4.
space with
Right.
the 4 possibilities versus the 2.
Any other comments?
Superintendent Lathrop, is there a preference from your leadership team as to which calendar is better for our community?
So Mr. Hicks's children may like me very much after I speak. Given the fact that Labor Day is a little bit earlier this year, we're actually leaning towards starting after Labor Day. They'll give our teachers an opportunity to come in before. They would work the 2 days, the Wednesday and Thursday before. They'd have the Friday off, and then our students would start after Labor Day. It still is reasonable. You're right, it's not as close to Juneteenth, and it is an issue. But given that, I suspect we still are uncertain about what our school year and staffing and certain things as we talk about the budget might look like. And given the fact that we maybe this year learned that a little extra time for the middle school would have been appropriate, we are recommending the after Labor Day start for students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm sorry, everybody, but I was asked by the NACAM people to make sure we get close to the microphones when we speak.
Yes.
So for everybody.
All right, so we will put this on for a second read. Thank you. Okay, before we go into the next item of the superintendent's recommended FY26 budget, there's just a couple things I want to address. You'll have noticed already on the agenda that we moved public comment to after the budget presentation. The feeling was that this would allow everybody to hear the full presentation, which we haven't had the opportunity to do yet. So that way we can then think of some of the questions based off that presentation that we may want to address after the committee discussion, maybe things that we didn't think about that you want to have questions answered we can reflect on for the next meeting, just to add that little extra time of reflection after the presentation and having an opportunity to view that. I will say that this has been a challenging year, and we do have some challenges ahead. I want to thank Ms. Lathrop for going under our direction. This has not been easy. When we had our working session, and as we've discussed in the past, we have to meet in public. We cannot meet behind closed doors to discuss these plans. So when we did the working session and Ms. Lathrop threw out some ideas, the school committee then sent her direction on how to proceed forward. So she was working under us, and she's been working very hard to get us the information we've requested under our direction. So I really want to thank her for that and all the work that she's put into that. As we work through this process, I know it's because we have to do it in public, it's not a clean process. It is a journey, and it's a journey that the public takes along with us. And so I appreciate everybody's patience as we've all waited to see the full presentation to understand what some of our options are going into FY26. Given that, I was approached by Ms. Cormier that she has a letter that she would like to read.
Thank you. So this is a letter to the North Andover community. As we navigate the difficult decisions ahead during this budget season, I want to take a moment to express my unwavering confidence in our interim superintendent, Pam Lathrop, and to share why I believe her leadership is critical for our district during this challenging time. I fully recognize the gravity of the decisions we face, the potential for teacher and staff layoffs, and taking an elementary school offline are not choices we take lightly. These decisions are born from a combination of ongoing spending hurdles and declining enrollment, which have put a significant strain on our resources. This is an incredibly hard moment for our community, and I understand the concerns and emotions it brings to our residents, families, students, teachers, and staff. That said, I am confident that interim Superintendent Lathrop is the right person to guide us through this difficult period. Since taking on the role of interim superintendent, she has shown remarkable leadership, transparency, and compassion. Interim Superintendent Lathrop's commitment to the district and its students is evident in the careful, thoughtful approach she has taken in addressing the current fiscal challenges brought to light. Throughout her tenure, interim Superintendent Lathrop has been open and communicative, ensuring that all stakeholders, teachers, parents, staff, and the school committee are kept informed and involved in discussions. She has worked tirelessly to balance the needs of our students with the reality of our budget constraints, always with an eye towards making decisions that are in the best interest of our school community as a whole. While these decisions are difficult, Interim Superintendent Lathrop has demonstrated a deep understanding of the complexities involved, and I trust that her leadership will continue to guide us through the next steps with care, integrity, and respect that this district deserves. I believe that with Pam's steady hand, we will move forward in a way that is both responsible and compassionate, considering the long-term health and sustainability of our schools. I am fully supportive of Interim Superintendent Lathrop and that she's taking the steps that she is taking based on the direction from the school committee. And I remain confident that her leadership will help make the best possible choices for our students and staff in this time of uncertainty. These are not easy decisions, but they are necessary to ensure that we continue to provide a high-quality education in a sustainable way moving forward. Thank you to everyone in the North Andover community for your continued dedication to our students, for your questions, for your emails, for your comments. We will continue to work together through difficult conversations and tough choices to build a future that best serves the needs of our children. Thank you, Superintendent Lathrop.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cormier. That's very much appreciated, and certainly reflects the sentiments I have felt throughout this process, so I appreciate that.
Support as well. I get support to say it, so I'll say it. Full support.
Thank you. Any other comments before we get into it?
Yes. So, I would like to report on the likelihood of getting a larger budget than the guidance we got from the select board. If you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said the odds are about 4%.
Mr. Moskowitz, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is this something we want to discuss after the presentation?
Of the budget? No, I think better in advance, if that's okay.
Okay.
I think the odds are now about 50 or 60%, which of course is good news. Is this close enough? I just have to make sure I don't actually swallow it. So I think it's important to have a little bit of background. The first point is you can't really understand the discussion we're going to have later on unless you understand the way that Proposition 2.5 affects budgets. It's sort of hard for me to believe this, but probably half the people in the room weren't even born back then, or certainly weren't, conscious of what was going on. But the general idea, so in most cases, and before 1980, school boards were taxing authorities. So if we set a budget, that also set the tax rate. So we really did decide how much we spent. That is no longer the case. The people of Massachusetts voted in favor of Proposition 2.5, which was based on the idea that total tax, local taxes would grow every year at 2.5%. If you were in favor of that, the genius of it was you could ask people whether they wanted their taxes to go up, and they would always tell you no. And it was particularly easy for them to decide if you weren't actually thinking about the consequences. But we adopted, the people of the Commonwealth spoke. I actually went around the state arguing against it, saying that it was a bad idea to have a 2.5% increase when inflation was usually higher. And that was a way of guaranteeing that over the long haul, every local government would be underfunded. So, let's see, where was I going to go next? Basically, that's how we got here. You all remember that we had an election in November, and the candidate that won because people were upset about very high inflation. And it was that period of inflation that preceded our budget crisis. Prices were going up, we all know that. but the total amount that that the town could raise the levy was fixed. And so the kind of collision that happened was inevitable. I guess the chair has said what I was going to emphasize, that Pam prepared the budget that you all saw because we asked her to. And we asked her to because it's required by the town that if we get guidance from the select board as to how much they're going to apportion to us, we need to submit, we don't have to endorse it, we need to prepare a budget. And people erroneously concluded from that she was actually arguing for that, which she was not, and that we supported it. So remember, we don't get to set, we don't get to decide the total amount spent on the schools. So, what is the best way forward? Prop 2.5 provided that a majority of people in a town voting in the ballot boxes could allow a bigger increase. The last time, I asked several people when the last override was here, and the answer generally was, I can't remember. But it was 18 years ago. So for 18 years, the people of the town have assumed and insisted that they were going to, that the first priority was to limit the increase in revenue, and that decision preceded any decision about how much we needed and how much we would actually spend. So then the question for my colleagues and myself is, what is it that we do, since we cannot increase spending? In my view, and I think we all agree on this, our job is to figure out the largest amount that we actually have a chance of getting passed. Up until a week ago, I think everybody kind of assumed that we could only do this if we had an override. And everybody who knows about overrides in North Andover said the chances of passing one on 2 months' notice or 3 months' notice were basically zero. Some people wrote to me and said, I think that there is taxing capacity without an override above what we're using. So I looked into that. Turns out there is, which means that there's an opportunity for us to increase the budget by more than the guidance, by a significant amount. We still need a vote in town meeting, but town meeting is totally different environment than the ballot box, right? If the vote is held in the ballot box, people are in the privacy of the voting booth or sitting on their kitchen table, and the question in front of them is, should we increase taxes? Guess how they're going to vote. But if it comes at town meeting, then there's going to be a discussion, and there are going to be people, sure, there are going to be people saying, I really don't want my taxes to go up, but other people, presumably many of you, are going to be at town meetings saying, no, it's worth paying because our kids are worth it. So what I've been trying to do is see if I can push the consensus about whether we're going to do that. This really is all related to Amazon coming here. And there's a sort of quirk in the way this happened that the details are probably more than we need to go into. But because of this quirk, we could increase the budget by more than 2.5% this year without going to an override vote. Originally, before anybody had any idea how badly inflation was going to, unmatched by large increases, was going to interfere with a decent town budget, the general plan, totally sensible, was that we would, as the Amazon funds came in, we would use those monies for a series of capital projects, including some for the schools. But what I tried to point out to people was, that was then, now is now, the size of the deficit, of the impact of the baseline budget on the schools is sufficiently serious that I think we should reconsider whether or not we might use the tax capacity that we have. And I think that the other boards are moving rapidly to say, yes, that makes sense, we should reconsider that. And so the manager is going to bring the three boards together, and her hope is that all three boards will agree together on an amount, which will be well over what I thought was possible a little while ago, and that we will have all the town officials working together to do it, which doesn't guarantee that, you know, you and your fellow voters will vote yes, but it's the best chance that we could possibly have. So that's, I think, a very favorable development.
All right, Mr. Moskovich, I do think we need to get into the presentation, so if you can. Okay. Was there any last comment that you needed to make?
I'm sorry?
Was there any last comment you needed to make, briefly?
Yes, I guess the last comment I wanted to make was, we really need your help to do this. And you need our help to do this. And I guess a few people have, let's just say, sent us notes that were less than favorable. Sadly, I guess, or I don't know, inevitably, you cannot knock us down or knock the superintendent down without weakening our ability, with your help, to convince your fellow voters to vote for this not the override, but to vote for this increase. Oh, and one other thing. There is no possibility that this increase is going to be big enough to make all of you happy. So you need to, I urge you to remember not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I know it might be frustrating, but something considerable is better than asking for what we can't get, appearing as heroes, but then actually losing the war.
Thank you, Mr. Moskovich. Mr. Hicks, did you want to add anything?
I agree with a lot of what, I have to get even closer. Oh, geez. I agree with a lot of what my colleagues have said. One note, and I'm not against this, Mr. Moskovich, but to change that would change our relationship. Some of what we decided as a town meeting a couple of years ago in terms of what our not paying for certain taxes right now, but allowing it to gradually come on with the Amazon money, and that even if we were to go after that as a funding source, it would result in some small increases in people's tax bills. So, like, yes, there is a mechanism that we could use, but that does still cost people very real money. And I don't think that's necessarily a good or bad idea. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that it happens.
I hope I didn't give the impression that it wouldn't. It would, yes, people would be voting to increase their taxes.
Ms. Lathrop, thank you so much for the work that you've done. We gave you, and I think it's the first slide in your presentation, some very direct budget directives. They're different than the budget directives we've had for the past 2 years as I've been on this committee. And you had much less money to work with those budget directives. So you had to assemble a team to do this really hard work. And I thank you for working with your building administrators to bring us something, and then taking the time to check in with us and being transparent about where you were before proceeding. It's that radical transparency is hard for people because inevitably you get an imperfect product, and you did not cross your T's or dot your I's just yet because you couldn't without our input. So thank you for walking us through that exercise and doing so with grace and poise and preparing what we get to see now. So thank you. I have nothing else right now.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I just briefly have two things, quick things? One is I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that what Dr. Moskovich was talking about, basically going up to the rest of the tax levy, does require a vote at town meeting. It does require a vote. So people will have to get out there to support it. They don't lose sight of that. That's really important. And the second thing is that a lot of the feedback that we've got, or certainly that I've gotten, through emails and phone calls and so forth, some of it's, well, a lot of it's been erroneous, But the most important thing people need to understand is you're watching the process happen here. It is transparent. Some folks are saying it's not transparent. It's completely transparent. You're actually watching the thing come together. So please be aware of that, right? That this is what we are doing, is putting this all together. As of this moment, there's no decisions made, right? We are about to embark on those decisions. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go into the recommended FY26 budget. I do ask that throughout Ms. Lathrop's presentation that we be respectful to what she has to present to us. You know, we may not always, like I said, may not always be pretty, but I just ask that we show her respect as we get through it. Ms. Lathrop, would you like us to hold questions to the end?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairperson. I also want to thank the board for the comments that they made. I appreciate the support. Mr. Moskovich, I appreciate the hard work that you've been doing in terms of trying to find alternative solutions to what is sometimes seems like an a mountain that's really hard to climb. I want to recognize the district administration for the hard work they have done in helping to prepare this. This is not easy work. No one comes to work to say, I want to make budget cuts. No one comes to work to say, I want to disrupt families. No one comes to work to say, I want to limit resources to our students. We come to work and we are in public education because we care deeply about the students. We care deeply about public education. We believe in the foundation of it. And it's generally why people move into administration. I think I've told this story before, but I moved into administration because I wasn't happy with some of the things I saw in administration. And I knew that in order to make change, I had to be the person that was in that seat. It doesn't mean that I'm popular, but it means that I'm willing to do the hard work. And I want to recognize the administrators and the leaders in this district who have worked alongside me to do this hard work to be able to present what we're presenting to you tonight. This evening, the superintendent's recommended budget presentation is going to include 3 primary budget scenarios. I'd like to provide a little background to help everyone understand why there are 3 scenarios and why North Andover is currently facing a significant financial challenge. Like most financial situations, it did not happen overnight, nor was it a result of just one factor or a single decision. The vast majority of our school's general fund is spent on salaries, approximately 83%. That's good. The district relied on ESSER funds, which has now expired, to fund over $1 million in salaries. These one-time federal grants shifted the burden of over $1 million in salaries to the general fund in fiscal year 24. In addition to the ESSER funds that we received and spent, the school also received other federal, state, and private grants to help fund our school operations. And some of these were reoccurring grants and others were not. Reliance on these non-reoccurring funds was not sustainable for the long term. More specifically, reliance on these funds for salary-related costs with the intent to keep these positions and employees was not fiscally responsible. The general fund became the funding source, but the budget request did not properly reflect that, and we had found ourselves in a pattern of spending more than we budgeted. Our budgetary increases have been 2.5% to 5.5% over the past 4 years, which equates to $1.3 million to $3.3 million. On the surface, this seems significant, but we have seen even greater growth primarily due to salaries, transportation, special education, and tuitions. I share all this information with you because it's natural to think if we plan for a level service year, then the percent increase should allow us to maintain all current positions and expenses we currently have. But unfortunately, that is not the case. That is why I will present tonight a level service budget, a budget that reflects our guidance from the town manager and select board, and an alternative budget that is less than level services but more than the guidance from the town manager. As Mr. Hicks referenced, I just want to start by sharing with you the school committee directives. These are the budget directives that we received when preparing the budget. A few things to note that I think are important is they asked us to create a budget that documents and correctly encapsulates the needs of North Andover Public Schools. That's service budget. We focus highly on the analysis and the operations of the school as well as in administration and for future planning and budgeting versus actual tracking. We have been fortunate to have a financial team that has been doing this hard work. Although the team came to us late, as many of you know, we had a vacancy for a financial director, and we tried and interviewed, but we did not find a person that met our needs for a very long time. We're very fortunate to have had Gail Dowd join our team. She joins Tracy McKella, who's our assistant budget director, and Janet Wright, who has been a consultant that's been working with us. This financial team has worked tirelessly to put together a level service budget that truly reflects the needs of our school district. Slide. So what this slide is showing you is that currently, FY25, our budget was $62,064,629. We have received a budget increase of 4.5%. That equates to $2,794,284. So our school budget, or our guidance, is $64,858,914. When we put together our level service budget by really looking at the ways that we're spending in our district, our level service budget for FY26 is $71,784,091, which leaves us of a deficit to close of $6,925,178. I just want to remind everyone that a level service budget should fully fund all collective bargaining, contractual increases, compensation for unionized staff for the next year, and increases in compensation for non-union staff. A level service budget should fund the forecasted transportation increases, that special education, both in-district and out-of-district, general education, our foster and homeless students. A level service budget should fund the positions and programs that were previously funded by grants. It should include special education out-of-district tuition increases and increased contracted costs. All of these have been put in our level service budget, which is why it is significantly larger than one would have anticipated. I think it's important to show you that in contracted transportation services alone, for general education, when we did a level service budget, encapsulating all of our needs and putting in the amounts moving forward, the forecasted increase is 40% over the budgeted amount for FY25 for general education transportation. For our foster and homeless transportation, the forecasted increase is 100% over the budgeted amount in FY25. Special education in-district is 122% over FY25, and out-of-district it is 85% over FY25. I share with this to help you understand why a level service budget is coming in at so much larger than one would anticipate. When you look at special education out-of-district tuitions, our forecasted increase is 201% over the budgeted amount. We have contractual agreements that we take into consideration when building a level services. This slide shares with you the bargaining units that we have, the increase that they bargained for, the COLA increase, which is the cost of living adjustment, and their step increase, which brings us to $2,566,267,000 to add to FY26. We have Unit B, which are administrators. Those would be our assistant principals and our program coordinators. They are in negotiations right now, and our non-union salaries have yet to be determined. The next slide shows you the level services at all of our cost centers, or all of our buildings in the schools, all of our buildings within the district. So we've shared with you preschool through 5, that's our elementary, our middle school, high school, special education, system-wide costs, maintenance, central office, nursing. So if a level service budget is $71,784,091. This is a 15.7% increase over FY25. The next slide breaks it out for you so that you can see the expenses, so you can see at each one of those cost centers the expenses and the salaries for elementary, middle school, high school, special education, system-wide, maintenance, central office, and nursing. Our next slide is our current elementary school class sizes. You'll see on this slide that we have a range of 14 to 25 in our class sizes. just to help you understand why Kittredge School looks a little bit different than some of the other schools. It's because Kittredge School has a multi-age class, 2 multi-age classrooms. So when you split those out, that's what it looks like. And you can see the ranges. So just for elementary school. The next slide shows you our current enrollment for middle school and high school. So it's the enrollment for 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, our average classes in our team classes, and then what an average class size would be in related arts. And at North Andover High School, we also show you the enrollment for 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, and what the average college prep course, an average honors course, and an average AP course. That is what a level service budget would look like. So again, I want to reiterate why it is so much higher than one would anticipate is because the increases are much larger because we have created a level service budget that meets with the budget directive of including all of the costs within the district that we are currently spending on our students. I'm going to move into the guidance budget, which is the budget that is the guidance number that we receive from the town manager and the select board. These are challenging slides to go through, and so I just want to preface it that this is difficult to look at. It certainly was difficult to prepare. So on this slide, what we shared with you is all of the cost centers again, showing you what the level service budget would be for each of them. And then if we were to follow the recommended guidance, what the guidance budget would be for each of them, and then what the reduction would be. So in order to meet that the recommended guidance budget, it would be a reduction of $6,925,178. We're going to break this down and show you what it looks like in each of the cost centers. So in pre-K to 5, if we were to move forward with the guidance budget and make the reduction of $6,925,000, pre-K to 5, we would see the impact would be a loss of 23 teachers, 13 teaching assistants, a counselor, the lead teacher positions, those are stipended positions at our elementary schools, a reduction to per pupil allocation, temporary closing of the Kittredge School, and additional staff stipends. In the middle school, the impact would be 10.5 teachers, a counselor, 2 academic coaches, 3 teaching assistants, the library media specialist, a reduction in office staff, and a reduction to per pupil allocations. At the high school, it would be 12 teachers, library media specialist, a counselor, 2 teaching assistants, a 20% reduction to our athletic budget, a 20% reduction to our Scarlet's Knights Academy, a reduction of office staff, and a reduction to per pupil allocation. For special education, we would see a reduction in teaching assistants, we would reduce staff, and we would eliminate tuition and transportation reserve. In the level service budget, we have a reserve. We put a reserve for out-of-district tuitions and transportation. As you may know or may not know, we don't currently have any reserves in our budget, and typically we may see some students who require, or move-in students, a level service budget allows us to have funding there to be able to meet the needs if we have a student that requires services outside of our district. System-wide, we see a reduction of stipends, so our staff was able to receive stipends for some of the work, and we've made a reduction in that area. Maintenance would have a reduction of a half-a-time custodian, and we reduce $15,000 that would come from summer help that we bring in to help our custodians, as well as supplies for our schools. Central office would make a reduction of staffing in the central office. So what does this impact? Now that you had a chance to see it all together, what are some of the impacts of this guidance budget if we were to reduce by $6,925,178? You would see an increase in class sizes in K to 12. We would eliminate the reserve for special education, tuition, and transportation. We'd eliminate library professionals in grades 6 through 12. We would temporarily close the Kittredge Elementary School. We'd reassign our Kittredge students to Sargent Elementary. We would reduce academic and social emotional supports that we offer to our students. We would reduce and change courses that are offered at NAMS and at North Andover High School. We would reduce professional staff development opportunities. It would negatively impact recruitment and retention of highly qualified staff. It would impact the delivery of 21st century skills. It would decrease athletics and extracurricular activities for our students. It would increase student to counselor and student to nurse ratios, and would have increased demands on all staff that are providing services to our students. If we were to move forward with a guidance budget, I've highlighted for you the budget directives that we believe we were able to meet with the guidance budget. We were able to create a budget that's within the allocated budget amount. Focus on the analysis and operation at all schools as well as administration. We did capture and document necessary fund allocation, and we did enhance our budget process. But the other budget directives are not able to be met with the guidance. We're not able to maintain class sizes between 18 to 27. We are not able to reduce programming. We'll have to eliminate programming, and we're not able to maintain professional development opportunities for our students, and we're not correctly encapsulating the needs of the North Andover Public School students. I'm going to move into now what I'm calling the alternative budget. This budget has downfalls and things that are not going to be happy, and that people aren't going to be happy with, but it does look at a reduction of $4,179,129. So what this slide shows you is, again, what level services looks like in all of our cost centers. It shows you what an alternative budget would be, and then what those reductions would be. So the alternative budget, again, is reducing a little over $4 million from the $71 million level service budget. What the next few slides are going to try to show you is some of the things that the alternative budget would bring back or would allow us to be able to do. So in pre-K and 5, if we support the alternative budget, instead of reducing 23 teachers, we would be reducing 16 teachers. We would be reducing 4 teaching assistants. We would be reducing the counselor, some teacher stipends, continue to reduce per pupil allocation, and continue to temporarily close the Kittredge School. At the middle school, we would reduce 8.5 teachers as opposed to the 10.5. We would reduce the library to a half-time position. We would reduce the counselor. We would make reductions in the office staff, and we would make reductions to per pupil allocations. At the high school, we would reduce 10 teachers. We would still eliminate the library media specialist. We would reduce a counselor. There would be a 10% reduction to athletics and a 10% reduction to Scarlet Knights Academy. We would reduce office staff and reduce per pupil allocations. In special education, there would be a reduction of teaching assistants. I just want to point out that you see the dollar amount on each of these slides. System-wide level services, we would have a reduction of curriculum. In our maintenance, we would have a reduction of a half-time custodian. Central office would reduce our the conferences and meetings that we are able to send our professional staff to. Our nursing would reduce a nurse. And that is the reductions, the differences in the reductions between alternative budget and the recommended budget. What I'm sharing with you next is what class size would look like. So if we were to move forward with an alternative budget, you can see the class sizes do increase. Highlighted for you the areas where you would see 27 in a classroom. You would see 27 in 4th grade at the Sargent School, and you would see 27 in both the 3rd grade and the 4th grade at Thompson School. What this slide shows is taking all of the Kittredge students and moving them to Sargent Elementary School. I think if you've listened to me and I have come and I've had an opportunity to speak to both schools and to speak to some faculty, what we'd like to do, if this is the budget that moves forward, or if this is something that we're able to, if this is what we're working with, there would be opportunity for Kittredge students to potentially go to a different elementary school if they didn't want to attend Sargent Elementary School. If they lived closer to Franklin Elementary School, there would be opportunity for that. You'll see on here there are some lower pockets, and we believe that if some students do choose to go to some of the other schools, then we would be able to reduce under 27 in all of our elementary schools. On the right-hand side here, it shows you the delta. So at Atkinson School would be a reduction of 2 classrooms, Franklin School a reduction of 1 classroom, Sargent's gaining 5 classrooms, Thompson is having a reduction of 2 classrooms, and Kittredge is having a reduction of 12 classrooms. At North Andover Middle School and North Andover High School, we've shared with you the class range. You'll see at grade 6, the team classes do go slightly over 28, and related arts also go over 28. You will see in the high school, those arrows mean that those class sizes go all the way across. You'll see in the high school that the class size might go slightly over 28 in the AP courses. The impact of the alternative budget is that we would increase class sizes K to 12. We would eliminate library in grades 9 through 12. We would look creatively to look at STEM opportunities there, but it does eliminate the library position. It does reduce library services in grades 6 through 8. It temporarily closes the Kittredge Elementary School. It reassigns Kittredge students to Sargent School. It reduces academic and social emotional supports offered. It has reduction in changes to our course offerings at North Andover Middle School and North Andover High School. It reduces professional staff development opportunities. It still negatively impacts recruitment and retention of highly qualified staff. It decreases athletics and extracurricular activities for our students, and increases student to counselor and student to nurse ratio. And it continues to put an increased demand on all staff provided servicing who provide services to our students. The alternative budget does, however, meet more of the budget directives put forth. The alternative budget creates a budget operating within the allotment budget amount. It continues to focus on the analysis of our all schools and administration. It enhances the budget process. It maintains the class size of 18 to 27 with the goal of staying in between those ranges. It does reduce and not eliminate programs, and it does provide for professional development for our educators. There's a lot of information there. I'm happy to go back to revisit some of these slides, to talk through some of the slides. I appreciate your attentiveness to this. I saw lots of people taking some screenshots. This PowerPoint will be linked to the slideshow, to the agenda, so you'll have access to it as well. But at this time, I'm here, and the leadership team is here for committee questions and feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Lathrop. Thanks up here. I appreciate all the work that you have put into putting this together for us in a way that it is broken down to understand exactly what we're looking at as far as these 3 budgets and how much they differ and the services that they do or don't provide. It seems it's very clear that we need more money, I think is what it comes down to. And I think we're all in agreement of that. That's not a question. We want to make sure our kids are having as many resources as they possibly can. So to see some of these numbers, I know is very disheartening to everybody. I do want to turn over to committee questions, and I'll end it. I'll go last. We're going to go in our voting order, so we will start with Mr. Hicks.
Questions afterwards, but I'll have to wait. Ms. Lathrop, between the guidance budget and the alternative budget, what's the total amount of teachers again that would be sorry, not teachers, total number of people, in terms of adults working with kids, teachers, teaching assistants, counselors, et cetera, custodians that we would have to, that would be impacted by budget cuts. I could do the math, the adding.
I put this, it would eliminate 45 and a half teaching positions pre-K to 12, 19 teaching assistant positions, 2 counselors, 1 nurse, a half a custodian, and several stipend and administrative support. But I think that was what you were looking for, 45 and a half teaching positions, 19 teaching assistant positions, 2 counselors, 1 nurse, and a half a custodian.
So almost 68. My refuge. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
For the level services budget, can you explain the, why did the contracted transportation increase so much? Is that based on the, was that the known amount that we negotiated, or?
No, it didn't increase that much. It increased what they told us it would increase, which I think is 3.5%. Tracy, is that right? Yeah, it increased to 3.5%. The reason why it's shown as so much more money is that it wasn't reflected in the FY25 budget. And so the FY27 budget reflects the amount that we spent, so that's why the increase is so much larger. But the budget, the bus company has not increased our fees any more than that is in the contract that they said they would increase our fees. I hope that makes sense.
So I'm just going to jump in on a clarifying question on that. So it basically what it is budgeted versus what was actually spent. Is that right? So that's the difference.
Correct. And so the reason I put it in there is because just what I said, that a level service budget you would assume would be able to fund everything that you have. But the reason why our level service budget is so much higher and coming in at such a higher increase is because it now reflects what we're actually spending on transportation and other things.
Thank you.
Excuse me, for clarification, that was the slide about the contracted transportation increases, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
No, it was just a clarification. Would you go ahead? I'll
No,
remember.
you can go.
So what you say are increases from what was budgeted, they're not actually increases from spending.
They're not,
We're actually spending this level now, right?
yeah, I don't think I have it linked there. It's in your budget book. I put the transportation slide, so you will see what the actual, why it's so much larger.
Tracy, could you just come up and speak in a microphone? Sorry. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that.
You can have a chocolate.
This slide is actually showing the fiscal year 25 budget versus the fiscal year 26 budget that we are projecting that we're going to spend. So this year's spending is over the fiscal year 25 budget also.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I think my struggle right now is I'm just finding the level services budget is whelming in that it's a very large increase. 15% is astronomical and is like simply not feasible. And the recommended budget is devastating in so many ways in terms of the education our kids would receive and the amount of people we would have to say so long to, and what that would mean for our community. And I'm oddly at a loss for words, which does not happen very often. But I feel like I'm okay saying this at least now, that, and this is for my fellow committee members, not for you, Ms. Lathrop, because you've done your job well, is that I would never be able to vote for a motion. I would never be able to vote yes for a motion that was a $64 million budget. That would be if that was what we had to vote on and that motion was presented, I would always be a hard no, because that is simply not what we need to do for our kids. I also, like, it's just bad. I'm going to guess many of you feel that way. I hope so as well. I also know that the $71 million is unattainable too. Like, that just is, what that would do to the taxpayers here in town, to the rest of our community is, and to our, it would just not be wise either. So I'm stuck in the middle of trying to figure out what's the middle ground. And I don't know what that is yet. And I thank you so much for giving us the details here that helped me start to work with that.
Agreed, and that's why there is something that we're calling the alternative budget. And again, there are things in the alternative budget that are difficult and challenging, and certainly not ideal, but we really tried to look at the budget directives, had some opportunities to look at really, again, that's why we have the alternative budget. It's not ideal. But there may be some, it may be a path forward. There may be some other things to consider, knowing that the guidance budget is catastrophic to our school district, but the level service budget is quite larger than any of us anticipated, and that's hard to ask for an additional $7 million. What we tried to show in the alternative budget is that we believe we can continue to move forward with the work that we're doing, with the goals that we have set forth, not to say that there aren't going to be challenges and not to say that there aren't going to be heartaches. And trust me, if we are able to come forward with the level service budget, there's nobody that's going to be happier than me and the administrators and every teacher in this district if we're able to move forward with a level service budget and be able to do the things with our students that we're currently doing with our students.
Can I ask a question of
Sure.
Ms. Endo?
Oh, yeah, even better.
A lot of people know I had the opportunity of having Ms. Ando as an instructor. She's one of the best teachers I've ever had. And I trust you wholeheartedly. When we look at level services and a reduction down to somewhere in the alternative range, are you fairly how confident are you in terms of the education that you'd be able to help guide our principals in providing for our kids? Challenges we know exist, but.
Again, like everyone said, nobody likes this budget. Of course, no one would be happier than us to have level services, but one of the benefits of consistent and rigorous curriculum is that we can offer opportunities to students, even if we move their school, even if we increase their class size. It doesn't make it easier, but the idea that we have consistent, rigorous curriculum in ELA math and we're building it in social studies, it helps. It doesn't solve the problem, but it also doesn't hurt.
If we were to go to the $64 million version, that would not work very well, I'm guessing.
I don't think we could meet the directive of keeping classes smaller than 27. I think we'd be up in the 30s.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to point out in the guidance budget and in all of the budgets that we showed in terms of the teachers, where we said like 23 teachers or 13 teachers, those teachers are classroom teachers. They may be specialists. They may be what we call a tier 2 teacher, which is somebody who supports academic needs of students. So that might be a reading specialist or someone that supports students who's not a classroom teacher, encapsulates all different teachers. So that is why particularly challenging with the $64 million to be able to meet all the needs of our students.
And just curious, when we look at alternative budget at the high school, do we have more than one library media specialist?
We do not. So at the high school, even with the alternative budget, we would be eliminating a library media professional in that. So that is the one place where we have an elimination and not just a reduction.
I have no other questions at this time.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Moskovich.
Well, I want to thank you, Pam. This not actually pleasant, but it's at least a way of understanding exactly what the choices are, which is important for us, and it's particularly important when we're trying to persuade people, I guess in this very room, 3 or 4 months from now, that why they should vote for something like the alternative budget. And I think having the data in front of us is extremely helpful. I don't have very many questions. I guess one question is, you and Ms. Ando have begun some very promising initiatives in terms of improving instruction, helping working with the principals to have them help with that. And I wonder, in the alternative budget, whether that's enough, or whether, since the amount we don't yet have guidance about exactly how big the alternative budget is. Maybe this is a question either for you or Ms. Ando, is there enough, or are there some small adjustments? Because I want to help you guys with the direction that you're moving in.
Well, there's never enough money. So we'll take all that we can get. But in the alternative budget, it does allow us to continue to move forward with the initiatives and the goals that have been set forth by the school committee and the district. We certainly could continue to look at that and look at some of the potential cuts, and depending on what that number might be. Obviously, we would work to put back student-facing positions and to continue that good work in terms of instruction, and the work that the leaders in our district leaders, as well as the teacher leaders. We have incredible teacher leaders in our school buildings. And in one of the budgets, we were eliminating those teacher leaders. We're eliminating the lead teachers, as well as some of the stipended positions for teachers who work on curriculum within the building. And so anything that we can do to keep our teacher leaders within the schoolhouses would be something that we would absolutely support and want to see.
The other comment I wanted to make has got to do with the size of the alternate budget. I had a chance to talk to the town manager about that, how she would envision this process of preparing for this debate at town meeting, and how we would, first of all, what the deadline was and how we would decide what the amount is. As a practical matter, the best way to pass it, whatever it is to make sure that our colleagues in the other two town committees that work on the budget are enthusiastic about it. So, first of all, we could think about, is there anything else? And then basically sit down with them and go back and forth. She said, I said, what's the final deadline? She said, well, the practical final deadline is when the budget is printed. So we'll have a vote on the 6th of February. But even then, you know, if we get a message from our colleagues that they're willing to support 2 but not 2.6, we probably would have to go to 2. And on the other hand, if we can say, you know, if we can go from the 2.6 over to 3, there's all kinds of advantages that could go up. I just want people to understand that, again, we can vote on this, but what really matters is passing something at town meeting, and what do we have to do to get it to pass? And also how we can move the needle. Are there ways, are there things that we feel are really important that we can persuade our colleagues to join us in funding? Sorry.
Right. As you said, I had an opportunity to speak to the town manager as well today, and it's her recommendation is that we may reconvene the tri-boards, and now that we've all had an opportunity, or now that we've had an opportunity to share the school budget, it would be important for the other boards to hear this information, to have to actually see what this would look like, to see the impacts on the school, and she's very favorable in terms of doing that.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes, thank you. So first, when I came in here tonight, I didn't think there was much of a way I would support anything other than a level services budget. That's where my head has been personally. And when I look at what, even with the alternative, your word you're using here, the alternative budget, I still see a lot of real pain there. That is hard for me to want to see us endure. So what I can't help but wondering, right, we're all sort of making the assumption that level services number, the 71, whatever it is, 71 million is impossible. I'm not sure that's true. It'd be difficult. I'm not sure it's impossible. And if people really want to see this happen, maybe we should consider that. I lived here 18 years ago when those events took place, and I was not involved in town leadership in any way. Then I was just a parent with 3 little kids, and it was pretty bad. And some of the stuff that I've seen here, even in the guidance budget, are things that I remember fired me up then, like no libraries, just to pick an example. And I'm not, but believe me, I also should absolutely say that I think Superintendent Lathrop and Ms. Ando and everybody else is doing fabulous work, giving us finally facts that we can really look at and understand. And I appreciate that in a huge way. So I guess I still want us to think about how we might get there, where we really should be. That's number one. Number two, I guess in terms of questions, the first question I have is, what were the drivers for you when you were coming up with that intermediate number? How did you, you must have had some criteria, right, that landed you at that number?
Yes, so the budget directives is what landed us. Say that there's, again, I'm going to reiterate, there's no one in this room that wouldn't want the level service budget. And if the level service budget is the will of the town and we're able to support that, then we wholeheartedly will accept the level service budget and move forward in that way. I think, in all honesty, as Mr. Hicks said, none of us expected the level shocking number to see the level service budget come in at what the level service budget came in. And if you've heard me speak, you've heard me say that I was projecting that the level service budget would be potentially about $4 million over. So when we created the alternate budget, we were working on what we saw as potentially that $4 million and the fact that it was able to meet many of the budget directives put forth by the school committee, which is why we presented the alternative budget. Again, it is certainly, there are parts of that are not favorable, but we do think it is a viable path forward, and that it does bring us some opportunity for some long-term financial stability. It does provide some educational equity across the district. It certainly does raise class sizes, which none of us want to see. It does have an elimination of a library. It does have reductions of things like a reduction of athletics, a reduction to the Scarlet Knight Academy. For those of you who don't know what Scarlet Knight Academy is, it's our high school after dark, basically. It's for students who receive their education after school or later on. It gives them some opportunity to work as well during the day. But we did see it as a path forward, and again, it was really the directives that were driving us.
Okay, so that's kind of how you landed it. You built it from the bottom up, right? You said, this is what, trying to capture as many directives as we can, and this is where that number lands. Is that more or less correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, certainly if there was a different number, we would love to have the opportunity to go back and be able to add to the budget.
Okay. This is sort of just a factual question. One of the things you talked about in each of these slides was see if I can find it. The reduction, I think it was per pupil allocation was the term. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate? What does that mean?
That means that every school leader has a budget that they're provided through the general fund to buy supplies and materials within their school. We give them an allocation based on their enrollment. And so we would be taking a reduction of that allocation that we give to every school for supplies and materials.
Okay.
Their ability they have some money that they could send their teachers to conferences, or if they wanted to do some professional development within their building, so it would be a reduction.
Okay, thank you. I guess one other question. When you came up, and this is great that you did this is kind of like my hot button over many meetings now, right? The grants and how we figure out their role in all of this. And I think in the slide here you said that the level services budget you've prepared here would take on what is normally funded by grants. So there is at least a tiny bit of hope we could recover something.
What the level
Through that-
service budget does is it takes on any non-reoccurring grants that we know. So if we have grants that were one time, they're not going to recur again, but we are going to continue with that. So if we're not going to discontinue what we're doing from that grant, all of that money has been put into the level service so that we can continue those opportunities.
Okay. So if we are after, I mean, I'm really looking forward to the tri-board meeting that was just described, because I think we do need to ask ourselves, right, where should we go with this? Should we hit this intermediate number? Should we really go to the citizens and say, if you want good schools, you want great schools, pay the $71 million? I mean, that's what it comes down to. So, if, however, we, for whatever reason, we land somewhere in the middle in a version of your, I can't remember the term you used, the
Alternative?
Alternative, thank you. The alternative budget. Would there at least be a little hope that it might go up a bit from grant money? Do I understand that right? Because people are applying for grants all the time.
We're
right?
applying for grants. We have title grants. We have federal grants that we receive. So there are other avenues for funding sources.
So it could help a little bit. I mean,
Correct.
it's not gonna, yeah.
And what we didn't talk about is we didn't talk about other ways of creating revenue. As you know, we made an increase to preschool tuition last year. We made an increase to athletic fees last year. It had been a long time since North Andover had increased those fees. That did sting in our families' pockets, but they also are still below some of our surrounding towns or towns we may compare ourselves to. So there are still opportunities to raise fees if that's something that the school committee wants to entertain. I didn't hear.
Yeah, that's, okay, all right. I think that's what I
Madam
have. Thank
Chair,
you.
could I just quickly answer one of Mr. Brown's questions? So the question that you're implicitly asking is, could we just ask for the $71 million? If it were not for the tri-committee meeting, the answer would be no, because if we asked for it and lost, we would lose everything. Hold on. However,
Mr. Moskovich, can you just put your...
sorry,
close? Thank you.
because we're going to have a meeting with our colleagues, we do have the opportunity that you mentioned, and which I think is somewhat comforting. We can go to them and say, what do you think? Are you willing to support this? What do you think the odds are? So that's good news that we have a chance to ask them if they would support more than that. I've also talked to the moderator, and the process reality is that on the floor of town meeting, there are only going to be two budgets. There will be the guidance budget and whatever we come up with as the alternative. And at that point, if we lose the vote, this is frustrating, but I mean, we all need to understand the reality of how this works. If we ask for too much and lose the vote, we can't then suddenly go back and say, wait a minute, Mr. Moderator, I changed the previous motion. No. So we have to be very careful. Absolutely, you and all of us should feel free with our colleagues to say it would be really important to try to get more, but we shouldn't insist on it if it decreases substantially the odds of success.
Right. Well, I guess the one thing I would add, though, is that everybody should also understand that's the reason we have to have the guidance budget, right? Is in case whatever we propose loses, right?
Yes, that's
at town
right.
meeting. So there's no alternative. We have to have that prepared, which we've done, right?
We've done that.
So-
But we don't have to endorse it, and none of us do.
Yeah. Okay. I understand.
Ms. Cormier?
So most of my questions have been asked already and answered. A few questions, Superintendent Lathrop. So just in terms of the difference in the budget between the school guidance, the school budget guidance, which is the $64.8 million, right, versus the alternative budget, which you have a total of $67.6 million, right? So I'm just saying if the alternative budget, if that was a budget that we went with, that's to confirm that's 2.8 million more than what the town manager, than what we have currently been allocated.
Correct.
So it's 2.8 more. Okay. And then just a couple more very specific questions related to special education with the alternative budget. With those cuts that would be required in the alternative budget to special education, would we still meet all of the IEP needs of our students? That's a question for Superintendent Lathrop and her team.
Yes, we would meet the IEP goals in the budget. There will be reconfiguration if in any of those budgets where we're not meeting, you're talking about the guidance budget?
I'm talking, no, not guidance, the alternative budget.
The alternative budget, yes, we'll meet the IEP goals of our students.
Okay, yes, sorry, my question was around just the alternative budget.
Yes.
So we would meet all the IEP.
I misunderstood.
needs. Okay, sorry. And then also just one more question on the alternative budget, kind of in the related vein. So with the alternative budget, with the cut, would we still be able to meet 504 needs?
Yes.
Okay, with the alternative, with the alternative budget.
Yes.
And I think all of my other questions were already answered. Just want to say thank you again, Superintendent Lathrop, for putting this together.
Thank you.
I want to ask our student representatives if you had any questions or comments that you wanted to include.
Thank you. So what does getting rid of the high school library mean? Like, are we getting rid of the books? Or like...
No, wouldn't be getting rid of the books. The library would remain the library. Ms. Holman and the staff at the high school would have to work creatively about staffing the library, but we wouldn't have a professional librarian that is staffing the library.
So how would students be able to check out books?
That's a question that we would still have to determine whether or not you would be able to check out books. Might be something that is an impact of losing that position, but we may be able to look at different ways of staffing. And if there are some alternatives, we would also try to work with, perhaps our middle school librarian and our elementary librarians, if there are ways we can reallocate some time for book selection at the high school.
And if we get rid of the high school librarian, will that also get rid of the online resources students have on the, like Sora and like those?
That's to be determined. We still have those subscriptions, so we would just have to figure out the ways that we would manage them.
Okay.
Those are great questions. Thank you for asking them.
My question was also like the same thing about the library, so that was answered.
Thank you. I just wanted to have a few follow-ups. When we talked about the grants in the level services budget, that's, possibility, of getting those, but that's also in the alternative budget, is right?
The possibility of getting grants is in all of our budgets. The only, what I tried to show in the level service budget, or what by my statement was saying that any non-reoccurring grants that we are anticipating moving that programming or that position forward, that's now included in the level service budget, where in the past, some of the positions that we had were funded by ESSER money after COVID, and when that funding went away, those positions weren't added into the operating budget.
All right, thank you. I also had a question when it comes to the special education level services. We know the guidance budget, that leaves us no room, right? That leaves us, how does that impact that to have that budget hit so drastically?
It will be a drastic budget, the guidance budget, the recommended budget for special education, and one of the biggest pieces is losing the reserve, because the reserve is something we haven't had, and it's one of the reasons why we're always overspent in that area. And then obviously, a reduction of support staff that work with our students will mean the different ways we may group different students differently, and looking at a restructuring of some of our special education programs.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I couldn't quite hear your question, so I only heard the answer.
The question was about the special education budget and how the recommended budget would be, how we would accommodate that, how that would be impacted, not having that.
Oh, okay.
In the $64 million budget, in the guidance budget.
So in the guidance budget, if we had an increase in needs, we would not be able to accommodate. That would essentially put us back into a deficit.
Correct.
Okay. With the guidance, or I'm sorry, with the alternative budget, how much would that impact our ability to have special education services?
With the alternative budget, we would not have an impact on our special education services. I mean, I say that not have an impact. We would have fewer teaching assistants, and there would be some maybe redesign a program, but we would have the funding in reserve if a student moved into the district. That wouldn't put us into a deficit, and it doesn't, there aren't any other cuts in the alternative.
Okay. Is there any concern with increased class sizes of being able to, for the teachers to be able to identify any needs in the classroom? Is there any concern of those being overlooked when there are more students in that classroom?
There's always a concern of that. When you put more students in the classroom, it takes an educator's time and it divides it among all of those students, as opposed to if you have a smaller number in the classroom. What the alternative budget does is it allows us to maintain more of our tier 2, or as I said, those support staff, so that we are continuing to address the needs of our students. It allows us to continue providing professional development. It allows us to continue the growth we're making with high-quality instructional materials. But more students in a classroom certainly is a burden on a classroom teacher or support staff supporting the students. We do still have lots of mechanisms in place, though. We have DIBEL testing, we have MAP testing, and we would have curriculum supports in place in terms of staffing to really to continue the work that we're doing to continue to have a robust Tier 1 instruction, and then the work that we were doing that Mr. Moskovich talked about in terms of our data meetings where we're really analyzing and looking at our data. It will be working very diligently to be able to do that.
Okay, and I know, and Ms. Ando, this is for you. In past meetings, we've talked about your training with teachers and being able to take the DIBELs and MAPS testing and be able to recognize kids' needs and where maybe they need to be grouped together or especially worked with. Will an alternative budget impact that training for the teachers to be able to recognize the needs in the classroom from DIBELs and MAPS?
Again, like Ms. Lathrop said, having more students makes the job more difficult for the teacher. I've taught classes of 16 and I've taught classes of 32, and there's a difference between the two. With our alternative budget, though, we will be able to continue to fortify professional development for teachers and keep our Tier 2 teachers in place, teachers who might teach reading, teachers who might teach ESL, teachers who might be supporting students in a different way. And so our recommended budget probably removes most of those supports. The alternative budget tries to keep most of them in.
Okay. I had the same gut reaction as Mr. Hicks that the recommended budget is devastating, and I think that's just, it's quite the gut punch. And I know that's something we just can't, I can't see us doing that to our school systems, doing that to our teachers, and disrupting our district as much as that would. I think we have to advocate for more money. There's no way around it. We need to make sure that we're providing an education that we want all our children to have. And I think that's why each of us are up here on the committee, is we all want to do right by our children, and we want to give them an education that they can walk away, that they're proud of. Again, I thank you for all the work that you've put into this. I know this isn't easy, and following our directives has not been an easy task, but it is very much appreciated. And I know we have a lot of figuring out how we're going to make this better. And it's going to take everybody's support. It's going to take everybody's working together to do this. It's a community effort. It really is. And it's bringing everybody together in a way that, and we've done it before, right? North Andover's come together before, but we need to come together in numbers and powerful to be able to advocate for our students, because the recommended budget is too drastic to be able to do this to them. I think we have just a couple, Mr. Hicks wanted to make a couple more comments, and Ms. Cormier?
So I have a specific question on class sizes with the level services budget. I'm looking at the right sheet. So on page, I'm not sure, but it goes through the elementary school class sizes for this year for all 5 elementary schools. So I'm assuming, with the level service, I mean, it shows looks on average class sizes. So if we went with level services budget, the class sizes in Kittredge are much lower than the other elementary schools, and that differs I think it's probably in between 1 and maybe up to, 5 or 6 in terms of class sizes. If we went with level services, would there be an attempt to put some equity into class sizes across the district, and would that be a good thing? I'm asking the question. And would you want to kind of level out class sizes between all these different schools so we did have equity in class sizes?
Yes. I mean, if we have a level service budget, I think that we still should continue to look at class sizes and provide some equity within, that's what the question was, provide some equity within the elementary schools. We would need to look at the split classrooms, the 2, 3, 4, 5. Those classrooms are smaller for a reason, but we could look at that. It may mean, it's challenging, and I think this is what I've said when I've had an opportunity to speak to some of the schools. If you have a small school and you only have 2 classrooms that are running, once you get over 28 students, you automatically have to split them in half, and they become these much smaller classrooms. When you have a larger school and you have more to be able to spread them out, that's why it looks larger. That's why larger schools have larger class sizes. We would have to, if we wanted to provide some equity, we could potentially look at giving some families maybe the opportunity, if there's some other schools they might want to move to. But the inequities that will exist a little bit because of the smaller class sizes, the smaller schools that we have. But we will try our very best to level that out. Okay. What we could do is something like when you can think about in terms of new registration, we could not necessarily go to your home school. If you're a new registration, perhaps you go to a school with a smaller enrollment. That would have an impact on transportation, though, so everything has, an impact.
Thank you.
I'll be quick, Madam Chair. First, I have some questions. Ms. Lathrop, that it's probably, I'm just going to talk about them briefly, and maybe it's best if you talk about them or give us the answers next week as part of our public hearing / school committee meeting next Thursday in this room again. Yes. Because I'm a planner and it's what I need to help me make things make sense in my mind. One of the things that people would be worried about, and I understand why, is the massive operation of what it means to move. And can you just maybe help us understand what that would look like, and what are the possible pitfalls that you could see that you might try to mitigate in advance? Just give us some reassurance that if we were unable to get to 71 million, what that then means for those families. I know you can't give all the details, but just some indication of what that could look like. And then and I was speechless before, and I haven't gotten much more to say other than looking at all the people that we will have to say goodbye to just makes my heart hurt a little. It's just sad. And I'm sad that we're in this position. And I voted last year for a level services budget that never came to fruition, and I'm sad that I think I might have made a mistake, and that hurts me a little, my pride. But I also, like, our job here is, as Ms. Koenig said, to advocate for our kids, and I think we can be loud voices, but if we are going to ask for that much more money and increase people's taxes by that much, which are already going to go up, anticipated a couple $100s already, just because that's normal, we need to all like come together to do that, because there's maybe 100 people in this room, maybe 150, but a big town meeting will get 3,000, and you would need a lot of people there to vote with you. So it's not a small task that we would be asking for. So we can be loud voices and we can do that advocacy, but we also need the people here to be there next to us. That's the only way it happens at town meeting. Even when something seems like a really, really great idea, you need to get that body to say yes. They get to make that decision. So I'm willing to step into the ring and do that, but we have to all come together to do it well and to make sure we get what's best for our kids.
And to add to that, we as a community need to think about how much can we realistically get passed. Can we get to the full service budget, or do we have to do something in the middle? I'd rather we walk away with something than nothing. So, as much as possible, and just really thinking, okay, how much can we realistically say will pass? If we go into town meeting and say we want the full thing, are we able to rally enough people to do that? If we can't, will we be able to rally enough people to do an alternative budget? Just some things that we really need to think about as a community of how we're going to approach this and to be successful overall.
Madam Chair, along those lines, as I said before, I was here in 2008 when the last override was passed. And one of the things at the time, and I don't know, Ms. Lathrop may be able to help with this, but at the time the statistic was that only 1 in 5 families in North Andover used the public schools. And the superintendent at the time, part of our grassroots efforts to pass the override was to make people aware of that so that the folks that did have children in the schools came out to town meeting and voted. And we set up babysitting, and we did all that kind of stuff to make sure that people who would vote, to get the people to show up, right? And so I don't know if it's possible for you to do that, or maybe I should be asking Andrew, the economic director, but I'd love to know if that statistic is still true. It might even be worse from our perspective as advocates, but at the time it was 1 in 5 families, right? So that's the hill we have to climb, right? We have to get those 1 in 5 families to all show up.
And it would be nice if each one got one neighbor to come.
Right, like thinking neighbor. No, I mean, seriously, that's a real, this is how it works. And I was surprised by that statistic when I heard it, and then I walked around my neighborhood and realized it was true. So we got to be aware of that. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we got to tell people about that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right. Again, I want to thank Ms. Lathrop for putting this together under our directives and all the hard work that you've put into it. We tasked you with a heavy, heavy task, and we appreciate you being able to deliver this information to us. And I know there'll certainly be some follow-up questions that we can address next week as we can continue discussing how we're going to accomplish what is best for our students. All right. Given that, we are going to enter public comment. I just ask as we enter public comment to remember that we are a community, we're neighbors, we want to work together, and that we all be as respectful as we can to one another. Go ahead, yes. I just as a note too, sorry, remember to enter with your name and address. If you live outside of a town, just acknowledge that you're a teacher, and you can just state the town. Please don't state your street address. We are limiting it to 3 minutes because we do have a lot of people who want to speak, and we really want to hear them all as much as we can. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jillian Connolly, and I live at 659 Waverly Road. Before I begin, thank you, Ms. Cormier, for your thoughtful letter. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Please appoint Ms. Lathrop to the permanent position of superintendent. I have a son in kindergarten at the ABECC and another son who can't wait to follow in his brother's footsteps. I'm also the school counselor at the Sargent Elementary School. I'm here on behalf of my own children and all of the students I have supported in my current role. It is clear Ms. Lathrop will provide the consistency and integrity that our students deserve. They will be the most affected by our current budget challenges, and they have the fewest opportunities to make their voices heard. So to the students of North Andover Public Schools, if you are feeling anxious and unsure about what the future holds, I want to reassure you we are here for you. Change is really hard, even under the best of circumstances. When you hear about the possibility of drastic and alarming changes, please remember, nobody wants this. Nobody wants these changes. Not the teachers, parents, students, superintendent, no one. But sometimes adults have to make hard decisions that they do not like in order to fix problems that must be solved. Please remember, no matter what choices are made, we are still here for you. Sometimes it feels easier to bury our heads in the sand and hope that big problems will go away. But that just makes problems grow larger until we can no longer ignore them. Instead, I want you to picture that you're running on a small energy tank inside your brain. Right now, our energy tanks are all running really low. We are feeling worried, stressed, and unsure about what is coming. When this happens, it is so important to conserve the energy we have left by only putting our energy into the things that we can control and not wasting energy on the things that we cannot control. My hope for you is that you can focus all of your energy on enjoying the school year. If you have questions that you cannot get out of your head, confide in a trusted adult. In turn, your trusted adults will put their energy into productive action to help answer the questions that are making you anxious. They will listen to your needs and share your feelings with our school and town leadership. Look to your parents, teachers, counselors, leaders, and friends who are modeling the productive ways to solve problems using respectful voices, listening to the ideas of others, and compromising to meet others' needs in addition to their own. Your trusted adults will engage in open, honest conversations, admit mistakes, and move forward to learn from those mistakes. If you feel comfortable getting involved, let your voice be heard, but do not feel pressured to do so. I promise that we will advocate for you and for what you need and for the school experience that you deserve to have, just as Ms. Lathrop and your other school leaders have consistently done throughout this challenging school year. No final decision has been made, but right now, many families and NAP staff are fearful of losing their school community if the Kittredge School is closed. This loss would be felt throughout the community, but the students, families, and staff of Kittredge will not bear this burden alone if it comes to pass. For the Kittredge families that attend Sargent, we will respect and validate those feelings of loss and the anxiety that uncertainty brings. Sargent wants to know what you love most about Kittredge so that we can make Sargent a welcoming and comfortable place that immediately gives our new Kittredge Kangaroos a sense of belonging. We want to know what you are worried about losing so we can create opportunities for you to have the same or similar experiences at Sargent. Even though it is not a change that we want, Sargent joining forces with the Kittredge community could make all of us stronger. Again, none of us want these changes, but if they do come to pass, we will be prepared and ready to support all of our students. I have heard a few times that as a district we are preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, but I promise the students of Kittredge, Sargent, and all of North Andover that while we may in fact be preparing for the worst, we are not simply hoping for the best. Our superintendent, leadership team, teachers, support staff, and families are working as hard as we can to advocate for the best, challenging our school committee and our town manager to step up and take action because you all deserve the very best education that we can give you. Thank you.
I'm just going to interject with just one comment. Mr. Hicks has a timer going. You will hear the buzzing. If you could just wrap up your thoughts when you hear that dinging go off.
Okay. My name is Andrea Liakis. I live in Gloucester, but I have been a proud North Andover educator for 17 years in my role as a chorus and drama teacher. And this is just, thank you, a little shameless plug for Legally Blonde. We open on Thursday at 7 in NIMS. Tonight, however, I stand before you as an exhausted educator. When the NAMS renovations began, my incredible colleagues in the Related Arts Department were looking forward to adding to our team. 10 new classrooms meant potentially adding more specialist class offerings and simultaneously meant bringing our roster sizes down. It was also an opportunity for a change in our building schedule, allowing for more collaboration time. The NAMS faculty and our admin were already working on those changes in committees, putting in countless hours towards goals that would positively impact the school, most notably our students. I personally was ecstatic about the updates to the auditorium, replacing decades-old lighting systems that were unreliable and time-consuming to deal with, as well as replacing the curtains that had been ripped and torn for at least the past 10 years. While it wasn't always enjoyable packing up all of our classrooms and relocating to new areas in the building, some of us doing it multiple times, we did it, thinking that when construction was done, it would all be worth it. This year we have 10 new classrooms, but we do not have 10 new teachers. They won't be filled next year either, or for the foreseeable future. Taking it one step further, based on slides shared with the community, we're looking at cuts of 8 to 10 positions at NAMS. The thought of having fewer adults in our building is concerning at the least. For those of us still there next year needing to pick up the slack of whoever is gone, it's overwhelming at best. Recently, a NAMS adjustment counselor resigned and will not be replaced. Her caseload has been reassigned. It's one less adult for a teacher to call when our students need help. The most significantly impacted by the decision not to replace her are the students. And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I was not expecting that. Her students that were on her caseload, and also the many other students who are so amazingly patient and empathetic when a classmate is dysregulated. Their education is also significantly interrupted. During my tenure here, I have worked under 6 superintendents and countless school committee members. In just the past 5 years, I have taught remotely, in person, on the front lawn of NAMS, fought for a contract that my colleagues and I deserved and continued to take a beating over. We worked with leadership recently to negotiate an increase in stipend contract dollars that was long overdue, only to now realize that some of those positions might not even exist next year. It has felt like 5 years of pushing a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down again. I know I am not alone in feeling this way. I do not pretend to know how to balance the budget. You can look at my credit card statement. What I do know is that as a school committee, you have an obligation to look at our district and realize that the budget we have been given by the town is not enough. It leaves no room for the smallest thing to go wrong, and it will go wrong. It takes educators out of classrooms while adding more students to them. We can't operate the way we expect of ourselves, the way you expect us to, and the way our students deserve when you take people away. We need them. I hear that bell. I'm not done. The students of North Andover need them. We need you to be bold enough to ask for more. Demand the budget that we need, not one that is recommended. We are tired of fighting for what we need and for what our students need. We need you, the school committee, to start fighting.
Mark Rogers, 19 Trinity Court. Full disclosure, my wife's a teacher at Sargent School, and I was the Finance Committee Chair in fiscal year 10 and 11, 2011. I was on the Finance Committee from 2006 through 2011 during the Great Recession. Has anyone here talked to the town about allocating free cash to the schools?
Does anybody have it?
Does that mean a no?
I think we've all had several conversations with the town manager about.
In fiscal 23, we had $6.5 million of allocated free cash. That's not a rounding error. That's a conservative revenue estimate. So someone may be sandbagging revenues or just wanting to fill our savings accounts. Well, our savings accounts are full, so we should be talking to the town manager or having a warrant article up. In fact, I'll make an offer. I'll put a warrant article up to transfer all free cash to the schools if I can get 10 people here to sign it. And this should be in addition to what you're talking about. This should be in addition to what you're talking about in your middle of the road budget proposal. So see me after.
I'll sign that. Joe LaCroix, 291 Appleton Street. So I'm new to this whole town meeting thing, to this whole forum, but it's clear that we have a lot of really dedicated people working here and a lot of really dedicated people that have become elected officials to help us do the right thing for our kids. The word mismanaged gets thrown around a lot, online especially, right, by keyboard warriors. We're not mismanaged. It seems like we're just underfunded. The opportunity for a level service budget just seems like the right thing to do for everyone. I kind of reject the fact that we can only present 2 budgets at a town meeting. Like, who decides that? Why? If you put together a level service budget and it fails, immediately go to the second budget. Like, why can't we have essentially ranked choice voting for a budget on this? Like, who's telling us that we can't put forth more than one budget? Like, shoot for the stars, right? Like, why can't we do that? That's not a rhetorical question. Like, somebody please answer me at some point. We really need to show up for our kids here. If you have teenagers that are 18, have them come vote. If you have teenagers that are not 18, reach out to families like mine. I have a little boy at the ABECC, and I have another 1.5 old. They're a handful, but like, offer to babysit so I can come here and my wife can come here and we can both vote. The other thing is prioritize the timing of the vote and make a timely meeting so that it's not 11 o'clock and everyone has to leave by the time you get to vote. Like, the format of the town meeting is incredibly frustrating, especially for young families who have so much stake in this town. I moved here with the promise of good schools, and I want to get that. I pay a lot in taxes. I'm happy to pay taxes for great services and for great schools, and I just implore everyone to spread all the information you get tonight and to get people out to vote. It's so critical. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jessica O'Donnell, and I live at 480 Boxford Street. So the bottom line here is the town manager or members of the finance committee here tonight? It's a rhetorical question. Our town is failing our school system, and that guidance budget is a joke. The idea that we are trying to set up our superintendent Lathrop to succeed, to give her that suggested budget, for the town to propose that budget, is despicable. It really shows me that our town management does not value our school system and the future of our children. Something I would love to know is for another meeting, is the per pupil spending for the proposed budgets. I think that would be helpful. But I also think that the $70 million level service budget may tell a different story if you really look at that based on how far over budget we have been over the last few years. Like, while yes, it looks like a 15 million, how much did you say?
15.7% increase.
15% increase from last year's budget. How much over were we on last year's budget? And so in reality, it's not a 15% increase in spending. And I think that's an important note. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I'm really not convinced that our town will pass an override. And with that said, no, I support an override. I support funding for our schools. But in the past couple weeks, I've met with so many school and town leaders, and they've all admitted to me that we were underfunding our schools. You know, our school budget and our per pupil spending needs an increase. Putting that aside, can we declare this budget mismanagement of previous administrations a crisis? And if so, can we ask our town manager to provide our school system with emergency funding? I'm calling for a freeze of any major changes to the school operating plans for FY26. We need a level service budget with no school closure, no staff cuts, and no program cuts until a full and accurate budget can be developed moving forward. In order to do that, we need time. We must maintain the status quo for a full school year with Ms. Lathrop at the helm, rebuilding the budget from the ground up. And here's why I feel a freeze is essential. If our current and past school district budgets are in such disrepair due to years of mismanagement, doesn't that constitute a townwide emergency? Ms. Lathrop is still uncovering hidden bills and grappling with incomplete records left by the previous administration. Any budget proposed tonight simply can't account for all the operational expenses because we're still in a discovery phase. Decisions made without complete data are not decisions grounded in reason or responsibility. Everyone acknowledges that Ms. Lathrop is essentially starting from scratch, and if we don't know yet what a realistic, achievable budget looks like for our schools, how can we justify closing a school and making drastic cuts? I'm just asking for the town to come together and recognize this situation for the emergency that it truly is, and to just look to the future of our children. And if we do move forward for an override, like, we all need to be there, but I wish we could look at other options. So, thank you.
Hi, Katie O'Donnell, no relation, 281 Bear Hill Road. I just have a couple of questions.
Your address, please.
281 Bear Hill Road.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Is that?
You can ask questions. We may not address them at this time, but we're keeping notes for next meeting.
Okay. So a couple of questions. Number one, I didn't see anything about the ABECC addressed in any of the slides. So I'm wondering what the budget impacts will be on the kindergarten and preschool students. My other question is, or I guess it's more of a comment, is my concern for the special education budget. If we don't have those reserves in place, I think as you see class sizes increase and you see students who maybe are, mild to moderate disability category, so kids who would generally be in full inclusion, I think what we're going to end up seeing is parents who are submitting evidence of lack of effective progress for their students. So for people who are not well-versed in special education, that means that the district is unable to meet the needs of that student. So if you have a kid who has, a dyslexia diagnosis and is in a large classroom, and then that's no longer serving them in an appropriate way, with a reduction of tier 2 services and a reduction of staff, they're going to be looking for an outplacement. So now we have no reserve and we have an increase in outplacements. And that puts us right back in the deficit that we were at before. So I think that needs to really be looked at as a potential severe outcome of having a drastically lower budget that maybe we're not thinking fully forward. So thanks.
Tim Seibert, 40 West Broad Street Road. The alternate budget is 2.8 million over the town manager's recommendation. Under the TIF, I believe, we have about 3.6 million of untapped tax capacity. I think we should go for all of it and bring that up at the tri-board meeting, please.
Good evening, Erin Blanchard, 2001 Salem Street. I have a daughter in second grade at Sargent and a son in kindergarten at the ABECC. Mr. Moskovich, thank you very much for the exclamation at the front end. Those of us born after 1980 appreciate it. Who are the other boards on the tri-board?
So I'll address that. We have the select board and the finance committee.
Perfect. Okay, I also agree with everything Joe from Appleton Street said, so I just want to highlight that the formatting of town meeting is not built for those of us with young children who are actually in school right now, who work full-time and can't come to town meeting with a hot Dunkin' Donuts in their hand and sleep in the next day. That's not for you guys to address. We'll work on that elsewhere. I, too, am happy to pay more taxes if they go to school services. Ms. Lathrop, you actually answered one of my original questions halfway through your presentation, in that there recently were increases to athletic fees and the preschool. That was my question, the business person in me. What are the other ways to drive revenue if our expenses are going up? Can we raise costs for the preschool? I know that might not be a popular opinion, but when you look at what the cost of it is versus other schools in the community that aren't getting full-time teachers, it's a significantly less expensive cost, so I would be all for that. And then transportation was a huge cost on that budget. Could we ask more households to pay for the budgets? I live almost to Middleton. My kids don't take the bus because I have to get to work, but I would be happy to pay for busing for, I'm over the 2 miles or whatever it is. I think we should, put that burden on the entire town, not just those that are looking for the bus services. I also was curious if we could look at early retirement packages to teachers who are on the higher end of the pay scale. Obviously, that would be a huge cost save. I have a child that benefits greatly from our special education program, so my next question is not at all to imply that I don't want or don't value the special education services.
However, it is a large portion of our budget. So what, if anything, can be done to reduce the costs? Is it federally funded? Are there grants available? And then Ms. Lathrop, thank you for joining the sergeant parents. I think that was last week. I asked this question. What are we doing to confirm actual residency? We know, as parents that have kids in school, we have to confirm it at kindergarten. I actually was laughing however many years ago that I did this for my daughter because I lived here for 5 years before we had children, and I thought I was going to have to provide a blood test at the end of the day to get in. But once you're in for life. So how do we know that they're actually residents? And I've heard from teachers, and they've told me some principals have suspicion of not all of their children being residents in North Andover. And then lastly, I'd love to win the lottery and pay the full $6 million right now, but how do we ensure that this isn't a repeat event in a year or 2 years or 5 years? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erin Harris. I live at 135 Stevens Street, and I have a son who's at Kittredge Elementary School. I would strongly encourage you to support the current level budget that is being proposed because it's a known quantity. It is based on actual expenses that we are aware of as well as projected increases due to the economic situation as we know it to be. The two alternatives are projections that are based on limited information known to us at this time. My concern is that if we take those steps in either of those directions with results in a change in our schools, closure of a school, we will be stuck with the outcome and potential collateral consequences for years to come. We cannot undo that school closure with any rapidness once it occurs. We'll be stuck with it for an amount of 2 to 3 years at a minimum. When we're talking about the line items that are on those budgets, the one that gives me great concern, both as a parent, as a property owner, and as an attorney, is when it comes to out-of-district placements. I think we have real exposure here, and we need to be evaluating that, not just with Ms. Lathrop, and I respect what she's done there and that she says we can meet our special educational needs. I don't think we can. Have we consulted with a special education attorney here to see what the risk of increased out-of-district placements is? When we're talking about Kittredge, we have a high level of children there on IEPs. Not all of them reside within the Kittredge district. Many of them were in other elementary schools to begin with, and then they were sent to Kittredge because that school could better meet those needs. For those children, we are at a real risk of exposure for out-of-district placements. If we are doing an out-of-district placement for a first grader, we're talking about costs for 10, 12 years to come. We will have the burden of this for a decade. If we have not properly evaluated those risks, we cannot know that we can stay within those budgets that were proposed because they are not an actual budget. It is a projected budget based on limited information. Wait a year. Do our due diligence. Look at the direct consequences. Look at the collateral consequences, or we are going to be worse off than we are right now. And when we are worse off, our property values will go down. When that happens, revenue will go down as well. This is a situation that can go from bad to worse if we don't put the time and effort into getting it right this time. 1 year of increasing this amount to stay level while we figure it out is nothing in the grand scheme of things. Don't be penny wise and dollar foolish. Do this right for our kids and for us as property owners. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Leanne Calora. I live at 183 French Farm Road. I come to you as a mother of 3 children, ages 12, 10, and 8, and also as a passionate educator who taught high school chemistry for 13 years and now as a high school assistant principal for the past 8+ years. I don't want to see Kittredge close, and more importantly, I certainly don't want all of our students packed into larger class sizes, as we all know that the opportunities afforded to students will certainly diminish. I want to be clear, excuse me, that I have full faith in our teachers rising to every challenge and always doing what is best for our students. They are the true superheroes, and it's not right to put that added stress on them. I hear that we need After hearing what you've said tonight, I hope you truly will fight for that. I believe I speak for so many residents when I say that as taxpayers, we are proud to live in this town. Many say they moved here because of the public schools, and we care about property values as well. We need to spend more money on our schools, or our town, our properties, and more importantly, our children will suffer. We need to get more money. That needs to be the solution. Our sole job as educators is to do what is best for students, as is the job of this town school committee. Making students pay for the underfunded budget just isn't acceptable. Please, please tell the town manager that cutting more from an already underfunded budget should never be the solution. We need more money. For such a beautiful, wonderful town with awesome schools, our per pupil spending also is not acceptable. Let's educate everyone about why we really need this money. I also, and I appreciate this, hear you sugarcoat to us the impact that this deficit and the alternative budget would have on teachers and students. And I appreciate your optimism and your eternal desire to make the best of things in doing that. But I beg of you to please not sugarcoat those cuts to the select board and town manager when you present your alternative budget. 30 kids in a class, we can't do it to our kids. I appreciate and thank Superintendent Lathrop and your administrative team for your thoughtful work on finding a compromise with this alternative budget to help satisfy a task that you were given. I just beg the school committee to fight as hard as possible for our students, who are the future. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Miss, I don't think we caught your name. Thank you. It's fine. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrew DeVore from 75 Forest Street. I'm the father of 4 current and future Sargent School students. I know the alternative budget is no one's preferred budget, but I would ask that the board and administration think hard about the messaging that floating that alternative budget puts forth. I heard the term viable tonight in describing that alternative budget, but from the perspective of a Sargent school parent, the difference seems to be the difference between cutting the left arm versus the right arm off, and neither should be viable. I appreciate the class size detail that was displayed tonight. It makes clear that the Sargent Elementary students, together with the Kittredge students, will be the most inequitably affected at the elementary level by the 2 non-level service budgets that were floated. From the numbers that were presented tonight, Sargent first grade goes from 18 to 20 kids in a class this year to 25 students next year, a 25 to 30% increase. 5 to 7 additional first graders for 1 first grade teacher. All the other schools in first grade under the alternative budget would stay at 19 to 21. I'd like to know, why is my daughter in first grade next year just learning how to read worth 25 to 30% less one-on-one time, less support, less help than all the other students at other schools? This is not just a class size issue between this year and next year, but it's entirely inequitable to the Sargent and Kittredge school students as compared to the other elementary students. That's not just 1 or 2 additional kids in a class. That's 5 to 7 additional kids for 1 first grade teacher trying to teach struggling students how to read. One of the most fundamental things that our schools should be doing. It makes me sick to my stomach to think the impact of 25 to 30% more kids in a first grade classroom will have on her and her friends. It's not a small increase. It shouldn't be viable in any sense of the word. Thank you.
Hello. Just before you get started, we're going to cut the line with the woman in the black jacket. Yeah. So that, and we'll still have our budget presentation for more comments next week, but for timing purpose, we'll cut the line there.
Okay. Christine Hecht, 1010 Johnson Street. I feel like so many people said things that I was already going to say, so I'm just going to cut to it. I have a 2nd grader at Sargent, and I have a 6th grader at the middle school, and my girls love school. They love the Sargent. They love the middle school. Having said that, I'm also a teacher, and I just have to say, if you increase these class sizes, you're asking for the mental health issues to go up, behavioral health issues to go up. I would invite any select board member who thinks that they have an idea of what really goes on in a classroom to enter a classroom by themselves with 30 children at any level and see what that's really like for one day by themselves. And to really act like you can teach them to read, to perform in dibbles, to even function throughout the day with the minimal help that teachers get. It's infuriating to think that that's doable, and to ask the teachers and our children to sit there, and that's just going to be their day. They're going to have to sit there with no help. These teachers need more help. I can't even believe it. I mean, I don't think that people really understand. We need more counselors. We need more support. The parents need more support. It's just not going to work. At baseline, I'm positive that all of these schools need more adults. Like the drama teacher was saying, you want to help kids, not keep it baseline. We want them to learn to read and to function as human beings and to work as a community. And you put 30 kids in a class with one person, it's going to explode. It is not sustainable. And it's not fair to teachers or kids. And I'm sorry that you have been put up with this challenge, but if they want to, come try it. If anybody wants to give up their classroom for the day, tell those people who think that works to come try to see if they can teach math, reading, science, social studies, and just being a nice person in your school for 6 hours with 30 kids. And just say that kid has a bad day and they need a little extra. You can't talk to a kid when you have 30. You can't say, oh my gosh, come over here, let's talk. Are you okay? What do you need? You can't do that. You can't reach them the way we want to do as educators. It's not sustainable, and they need to find the money because it's honestly, these kids are going to have so many issues if you ask them. Sargent is amazing. Every teacher I've had there, I look up to them as a teacher, okay? But they're not miracle workers. They need 5 of them. They need 3 of them. And I just thank all the teachers for everything they're doing, and I thank you for what you're doing. But some of these people who are saying this to you need to get in touch with what it's like in a classroom in 2025. Thank you.
Eric McLean, 399 Ray Street. Madam Chairwoman, committee members, I want to thank you for your time and your volunteering and running for this position. It's unfortunate that the only time a guy like me comes and speaks to all of you great volunteers is when there's a crisis like this. So I do want to thank you. I want to thank the superintendent for an amazing presentation that put facts on the table. After saying that, I'm going to tell you that there is no budget this board should vote for other than a level service budget. And I heard a lot that almost $8 million increase is unattainable. I want to put some numbers to that, right? There are over 11,500 homes right here in this great town of North Andover. They represent over $8.3 billion in real estate value, right? Right here in this town, $8.3 billion in real estate value in homes alone. 66% of our tax revenue as a town come from real estate tax, okay? If you did a level increase against the 11,500 homes, more are being built every day, right? That would be an increase of less than $460 a year to keep our schools. $460 per household to keep our schools. Now, there are some individuals in our town who are on fixed budgets, and I don't want to pretend that $460 is nothing to them. But out of the $8.3 billion in real estate assets, for the majority of homes, $460 is nothing. I do not like taxes, but I am fine if you increase mine by $460. I implore you again to do the hard work that is in front of this town. This committee's job is simply to fight for our children. Force the finance committee, force the selectmen, force the residents of this town to come out and vote at town meeting. Do what is right for the children and vote for the correct budget. Thank you.
Juliette Darmon, teacher, North Andover resident, 32 Clarendon Street, North Andover Teachers Association president. Dear Chair and members of the school committee, I know most of you are new to your roles as school committee members and you're facing some difficult decisions. While I don't envy your position, I want to remind you that as a school committee member, your primary responsibility is to the children of this town and not to the adults of this town. So please keep this in mind. Now, for over 10 years, at least, this town has failed to properly fund its schools. North Andover Public Schools have been below the state average in per pupil expenditure. This means that this town spends less per student than the state average. And we are not speaking of a couple of dollars here and there. We're talking about millions. If North Andover had spent at the state average on its students between 2013 and 2023, it would have spent an additional $140 million just to be average. North Andover Public Schools do not have a spending problem, nor do they have a funding mismanagement problem. They're not overstaffed, and they do not overpay. The reality is quite the opposite. We are, as a whole district, understaffed. And even with our recent contracts, we are still not even close to the highest paying district in the region. If this vicious cycle continues, mark my word, this district will deteriorate. I hope that this school committee has the courage to do the right thing and demand the funding that the children of this town deserve. Funding that they have not had for years and years and years. It's time to end this. Trust me, standing up for what's right feels good. Vote for level service budget. And all of you who hear me here, and if you're watching at home, join friends and family of North Andover Public Schools on Facebook. Thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Arciero, 93 Wintergreen Drive. First, just want to echo a lot of the sentiments that were already shared by other residents, and just say, just because spending is over budget doesn't mean that that spending is unnecessary. In the audit that was conducted about the deficit, which Ms. Lathrop quoted earlier tonight, in that audit they did not find or speak to mismanagement funds or frivolous spending or anything like that. What they spoke to was increases in salaries, expected increases in contracts, and the fact that we did lose some revenue from federal COVID funds. It also spoke to the unrealistic nature of how when we built the 2025 budget, we approved a budget that was only 0.8% increase over 2024 funding. So right from the get-go, as soon as that was approved, it was doomed to fail and lead to a deficit to get to where we are right now. And I know that, it's not always easy to compare spending levels from different towns, but I think when we're talking about a big number like this, it's important. When we see a $72 million budget number, we need to understand how that relates to the rest of the state. If you look at two key data points that at least I was able to see at the Massachusetts Department of Education website, if you look at the cost per pupil, we consistently spend $3,000 less per child than the state average. The state average was 21,946, and North Andover was at $18,221. If you're wondering where that ranked, there were 258 districts who spent more per pupil and only 51 who spent less. If you then look at the investment over Massachusetts foundation funding, which sets a minimum threshold for education spending per town, and then you look at the investment that each town sets above and beyond, or has above and beyond that initial investment, North Andover was at 29.5% in 2022, and that dropped to 26.1% in 2023 over the minimum requirement. And while those may sound like big numbers, those two numbers again put us in the bottom half of the state in investment over that minimum required funding. It also obviously included a downward trend, and now we're talking about additional cuts. Those were based on actual spending, and again, here we are talking about $4 million in cuts. So while I certainly appreciate and understand the idea of not letting perfect get in the way in the good, I do not think that using those two data points, anyone here could say that even level services funding is perfect, but it's the only thing that we should be looking to move forward with. Thank you.
Susan Lee, 70 Lost Pond Lane. I'm a parent of a 3rd and a 5th grader at Kittredge currently, and I just had to come up here and represent for the Kittredge families. Sorry, this is getting more emotional. I'm just saying, we asked you guys, our elected school committee members, to provide a possible alternate solution to closing Kittredge and making all of these teacher and program cuts a viable option that doesn't put the education and the future of our kids at risk. You know, I have so many questions about things that were presented today. The amount deficit, close to $7 million, you know, why are we responsible, especially the Kittredge Sargent families who are going to be most impacted, responsible for closing that gap in this 1 year? You know, how was this never factored in the prior years when we were discussing this budget? Special education out-of-district costs increased by 201%. You know, after many things that were commented today, you know, did we consider how that amount is going to increase if we were to close Kittredge at the end of this year? And then salary increases for teachers and staff, certainly a lot of that was appropriate, and, you know, I always want to pay more for teachers for all the hard work that they do. You know, is there a way to kind of consider all of these, you know, the biggest expenditures? You know, are we able to kind of level some of those, you know, pay raises so that we can at least keep more of our teachers? You know, thinking more globally versus any of our options, which so far has been to close Kittredge and then close Kittredge. So I just, you know, I speak to the group here and the board here to just consider and be open to other options than just closing our school. And then, you know, I promise you'll end up seeing an outflux of students leaving our public school system. Class sizes soar, less education for our students, which have clearly been documented here, lower property values as our education system loses its reputation that you're putting at stake, and fewer and less qualified teachers and staff, because many teachers won't necessarily want to stay in a system that's this unstable. They can, you know, go elsewhere where it's going to be more stable or possibly even more lucrative. I know your jobs aren't easy, being given the parameters you've been given to work with, but please understand the proposal you set forth will forever have negative ramifications on our system for years to come. And I don't want that to be the legacy for our town or for this board. So, you know, if the decision to close Kittredge before a thought-out plan is designed, how's the town going to make payments for the new Kittredge to reopen? Because even with state funding, the local funding sources won't be voted until the 2026 fiscal year. So what happens if that funding doesn't pass? Then we'll have no new school for our kids to kind of reopen to, and this is the circumstances that we have to accept. Like, these kids deserve better, and so we have to have a comprehensive thought-out plan before we make these type of drastic measures and decisions. So I just ask you, as a parent in this town, these kids deserve better. I just have faith that we, as North Andover residents and families, that we can continue to raise our kids and educate them in this town. Thank you.
Hello, Nadia Chinchilla at 64 White Birch Lane.
There's been a lot of conversations about per pupil spending, so I spent way too much time at the Massachusetts Department of Education page today, and I have some numbers for you. I've often heard that North Andover should not compare itself to Andover or North Reading because that's not the benchmark that we use. And the Finance Committee released a question and answer document that seemed to compare us or use us as a benchmark against other towns. So instead of using Andover or some of these other towns that I think most of us would compare us to, I used the cities or towns that the Finance Committee recommended we use as a benchmark. I will let you know that according to the Massachusetts Department of Education, I'm not from here, Billerica spends about $19,729 per pupil. Danvers spends about $19,422. North Reading spends about $19,947. Tewksbury, thank you, spends about $20,674. Wakefield spends about $18,789. Wilmington spends about $22,987. North Andover spends about $17,409. Now, I don't know if my math is correct, but if I'm looking at the budget, the highest budget that was presented, and I divide that by the number of students that I think are enrolled, that number comes out even lower. So I do appreciate the question that somebody else asked about what's the per pupil spending, because by my calculation, it's actually about $15,000 and some, which is significantly less than the $20,000, the $18,000, the $19,000 that other benchmark cities are using. I'll also address the fact that very frequently I'm hearing some of our leaders talk about the increase in salaries that the teachers got as if that were the cost for the budget deficit. So I dug into some of the salaries as well and couldn't help but notice that, again, using the benchmark towns that the Finance Committee gave us, the average salary for a teacher in Billerica is $96,000, Danvers $92,000, North Reading $84,000, Tewksbury $86,000, Wakefield $80,000, I'm getting old, I can't see, 80-something, North Andover $83,000. North Andover is the town, compared with all the others that you told us that we should compare ourselves to, is spending less per pupil, is paying our teachers less. Yet, I have some more numbers. Oh my Lord, I need glasses. The average income in the towns where they spend the amount we spend per pupil, I'll use those towns, Methuen, Winthrop, Malden. The average household medium in Methuen is 103, in Winthrop 106, in Malden 95. The average household income in North Andover, $134,000. The town has the money. We need to spend it on our kids. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shannon Gailey. I live on Phillips Court. I'll keep this short and sweet. I actually just came here tonight. I just planned on listening and not talking, so this might not be as eloquent as it could have been, but after seeing the slides and the options presented, I was really disappointed because we keep being told that no decision has been made, yet Kittredge closing is on all three options. How is that not a final decision? If those are the three options that we have to pick from, Kittredge is closed on all of them. Oh, okay, then my bad, I apologize. I didn't see it on the first one. But I do feel like a lot of other people have been saying too, that more thought and time needs to be put on this. This is huge, this is challenging, and it's going to affect all of the kids. The last thing I just want to say too, to follow up with other people's comments, is that at the rally that we had, which was great, and it was so nice to see so many people in town support us, that one of the parents there made a great comment. Families don't come to North Andover for the beaches. They come here for our schools. And if some of these proposals go through, families will be moving out of our town. New families will not be moving into this town, and I would just like you to consider that the costs that will be. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all. I appreciate, I know we all appreciate the comments and the feedback and the questions that we can come back and reflect on as we consider this these very tough circumstances. Our next meeting will be Thursday, January 30th, back here at the North Andover High School Auditorium, and that's when we will have our public hearing on the FY26 budget and further discussion. You wanted to add something, Mr. Hicks?
I do. Public hearing is, we're required by law to do it, but it's also a really good idea. It's, we'll have public comment specifically on the budget alone, but we'll also have regular public comment for other things for next week's meeting. But if it's about the budget stuff, I would recommend that you speak during the public hearing portion of the meeting. And we also have a chat coming up on the February 1st.
Yes, February 1st, there's still that school committee chat with Mr. Moskovich and Mr. Hicks. That'll take place at central office from, is it 11 to, I think I've said it so many times, you think I'd know this. 11 to 12. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So lots of times lots of opportunity that we hope that you'll continue to share concerns and questions, and so that we can address them as best as we can. Given that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
All right. Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Moskovich?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.